James.
The winter that we graduated, we went on holiday to India with throwing frisbee on the beach, and James said, "Should we just get married?" And I remember saying, "I'll take you ridiculous." And he said, "Well, will you marry me in the end?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Okay, let's do it. What are we waiting for? Why waste time?"
He had difficulty finding work, so we composed together a little advert we sent to all the companies, available for free. One of the star pupils from Uppingham has escaped the employment now, and it's when having to work for 6 months for free so you can see how good he is, or something like that. That did the trick.
In 1995, James joined the family retail empire, working for his father.
It's a very personal business.
Sarah Dunning is a non-executive director on the Simpsons board.
James spends a lot of time doing shop visits. He doesn't announce his visits, he just pops in and he talks to the colleagues about what they're doing, problems they're having, opportunities they're seeing.
One of our colleagues, who's a previous drug user, up to his teeth with often, he was in incredible pain and he was really struggling to get to an NHS dentist.
Darren Burns, a Tooting colleague, raised this with James.
James said, "Okay, I want you to take him to the nearest cosmetic dentist and I want you to pay for full veneers." And now this colleague is not only paying free, but his self-esteem's through the roof.
In 2002, James took over as CEO from his father John, who is now chair of the board. His management philosophy is reflected in the company headquarters, says Sarah Dunning.
They don't call their head office, by the way.
They call it Timpson House.
You go to the loos and they've got those funny mirrors that make you look very fat and very thin or wiggly. They've got a giant sequin shoe upstairs. So they've got all sorts of things which are reminders of the fact that this is not a conventional business.
We've got a 5-inch pole on the mezzanine, so for any of our colleagues who really wish to get down to that. It is true. The desk previous to that was essentially a huge shoe, but yes, the one he's got now is a very old prison door.
Why a prison door? Well, back in 2002,
We happened to be invited into an open prison, and while I was just having a lovely time hearing everybody's stories and having a great evening,
James was impressed by Matt, the young man showing him around.
James thought Matt was very intelligent, very articulate, and he thought Matt would make a great addition to the business, so he gave Matt a business card and said, "Matt, when you get released from prison, give me a call and we'll see if we can get you the job."
Matt did call, and James did give him a job.
James is genuinely very passionate about prison reform and prison rehabilitation, so people are still astounded that approximately 12% of our colleagues are made up of prison leavers. James has managed to convince lots of other businesses and lots of other UK employees of the benefit of hiring ex-offenders.
And Darren speaks from experience.
In the last 6 months of my prison sentence, I felt pretty hopeless. I certainly didn't think anybody was going to offer me a job.
But he worked for Timpson on day release, and at the end of his sentence was interviewed by James for a full-time job.
And here I am today.
The company did make some early mistakes.
I think it's fair to say that some of the people that we initially employed who were prison leaders maybe weren't joining the business for the right reasons. I mean, I've heard stories of people come to James and, "Oh, James, I've got no furniture," and James, I've got a new sofa, and, "Oh, James, you've got no white goods," and before you know it, new washing machines and tumble dryers are being delivered. And obviously, what these goods were often being sold and spent on drinking, drugs, and God knows what else.
As James himself admitted to Andy Coulson.
In the early days, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was making mistakes. I was recruiting people who were the wrong kind of people. I was believing their bullshit stories.
James was describing as a bullshit detector.
Says Darren, he now heads the Timpson Foundation, the arm of the business providing training and employment to marginalised groups.
But one of the criticisms of James is that he does like to see the best in people. Sometimes I'm able to put through some of the things that people are saying. We now choose people a bit more carefully, and we've got processes in place.
Less than 5% of the people Timpson employ with a criminal conviction re-offend, and James has described them as our most honest colleagues. James became chair of the Prison Reform Trust in 2016. Amazingly, he still has time to enjoy himself. He loves old cars.
so I think it started with his grandfather who had Bristol cars.
But in 1972, when Grandad Timpson was ousted as chairman by his own board, says John Timpson,
You were voted off the board meeting by 7 votes to 2, and he was told that he had to return his car to the office, and they made sure he never could get it, because the condition of selling it on to someone else was that no one sold it back to my father. So it was pretty gruesome stuff in those days.
Painful times for the family and the business. A decade later, the family regained control of the company, but the lost car was still a sore spot. So, when a car dealer told James he had that very car, he had to buy it, says Roisin.
And then, unfortunately, it seemed like the grandfather had quite a lot of cars.
And James kept buying them. 5 so far, which they take on historic car rallies. How is he to rally with?
I don't think he's that practical. I think I remember when the car blew up effectively, and I opened up the hood, and James and I both looked at each other and got no idea.
James's other passion is dance music. He loves it and says that the highlight of his year is the Tomorrowland EDM Festival. That's electronic dance music, and I totally knew that.
He just loves it. So he's pretty shameless. He played at our daughter's 21st, and they're all really generous about it, and it was surprisingly cool, actually.
Oh yes, Roisin and James have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. In 2018, Timpson was even a musical at the Edinburgh Fringe, written and performed by Giggleworm. It's a Romeo and Juliet story. The Montesquieux and the Capulets are warring families who, spoiler alert, end up united under one roof, mending shoes and cutting keys. You can watch the full hour-plus production on YouTube. But then, in 2020, COVID.
At the start of the lockdown, COVID, we were forced to shut all our shops. We were losing cash at the rate of $1.5 million a week.
My husband and I turned up in our local, I think that's Morris, and the Timpson shop was just boarded up shut. And I remember him standing there just going, oh my God, we don't have a business. And we had a lot of the help going, to put it mildly, because we were paying everybody and had committed to do that. That was very much his decision very early on.
James shared his experiences in a weekly column for the Sunday Times. Afterwards, Roisin suggested that those thoughts should be collected.
James doesn't really reflect a great deal. He's too busy thinking what he's going to do next. He doesn't want it just to disappear into the ether. We privately published it as I just more or less it was for our children.
Now, as the business recovers and continues to grow, that collection has been published as a book, The Happy Index, Lessons in Upside Down Management. All the proceeds will go to the Prison Reform Trust, of which James Timpson is still chair. We've researched in vain for anybody to say anything about James. It just doesn't make him out to be completely lovely.
Well, yeah, he's a rare, but you know, I mean, he's my husband, but he's I think you'd have to call a lot of people.
We called as many people as we could, but it looks like James Timpson may really be a bit too trusting, incapable of changing a spark plug, but generally rather lovely.
This week's profile was presented by Commander Harkness, and the producer was Ellie Harris. Something understood in 5 minutes reflects on how our identities change over time through our choices and experiences.
On BBC Radio 4,
I want to talk about a very different revolution that is taking place right now, quietly sweeping the globe without bloodshed or conflict.
I'm Misha Glenning, and I'm telling the story of the microchip and how it has been driving geopolitics for over half a century. Why have wars been won and are still being fought over something no bigger than a fingerprint? And how will this minuscule technology decide our futures? The rise and rise of the microchip on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds begins this Thursday afternoon at 4.
BBC News at 6 o'clock on Sunday the 18th of February. This is Alan Smith. Good morning. The White House has blamed Russia's capture of a frontline town in eastern Ukraine on the failure of the US Congress to approve a package of military aid for Kyiv. President Biden spoke by phone with the Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky after the announcement that Ukraine's army had pulled out of the town of Avdiivka. Mr. Biden told him he was confident that Congress would approve the war aid. Our correspondent Will Vernon reports from Washington.
In a phone call with President Zelensky, Joe Biden emphasized the need for the US Congress to urgently pass legislation to grant more military aid to Ukraine. It was congressional inaction, said the White House statement, that led to the Ukrainian army's